So if John and Teddy are ready, we can start. Salim?
Yeah, sure, you can start. I'd like to thank you all again for being here. Uh, Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, Zina. Thank you, Jan, for meeting with our students on the health value. And the second section will specifically focus on contextual factor affecting academic integrity. I'm sure it will be another great session, and I wish you good luck. So I'm leaving you with your students, Zina, Teddy, and Jan. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be back, guys. Maybe you're having too much of me in one day.
I'm sure not.
So this is day one, session 2, where we are going to be looking at and discussing contextual factors that are affecting academic integrity globally. Of course, as Salim has said, there are 3 of us who are going to be conducting the session. There's Teddy Fishman, there's John Dipp from Mexico, and myself, Zenith. Just a quick disclaimer before we go ahead. A lot of the content and slides that you will see in this particular session, we have actually conducted a similar session for the Çanakkale Mart University in Turkey in October, where Dr. Teddy and myself, we were invited as guest speakers for Dr. Salim's PhD students. So we want to give due credit and acknowledgement for that instance from where the slides and some of the contents have been taken. So this is overview of the outline, the things that we want to discuss in this session. So we are not really going to be making this into a lecture as such, but the way it's going to work basically is that we are going to be bringing up the topic, and then we're going to be having discussions among ourselves with you guys, the students, and then continuing on with the next topic. And in between, we may have some formal activities or discussion tools that we will use. As before, of course, anytime you have any questions or doubts, or you have something that you want to say, please feel free to put it in the chat. We will keep an eye on the chat as well. So the speakers, as I mentioned, that's us. I'm not going to reintroduce. And as Inga had said, please, if you need to read more about us, feel free to go to the website and check out the details. So let's start with the very first question, which is, why do we grade? Right? So right on, as you can see, I'm going to start off with a Mentimeter. Now, most of you have used a Mentimeter, so you know how this works. I am putting that link in the chat. So the question is, why do we grade a student's work? Right? So most of you, a lot of you actually are teachers already. So this is something you can answer very easily. Let's see what the answers look like that are coming through. Teddy, I'm not sure if you're able to see because you're on the phone, so I will read them out as they come through.
Oh, thank you. I can see.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So evaluate students' understanding, measure learning outcomes. Somebody said to show we are boss. Maybe, you never know. Yes, for some people, sure. I hope not, but you're right, maybe. Monitor, measure learning, allow reflection, provide feedback, quantify ability, okay, show progress. Could be an institutional requirement, yeah, sure.
To waste time.
Okay.
I love this tool. I really love Mentimeter.
Right? Isn't it amazing?
I like it. I have used other polling software, but I've never seen any this dynamic. I really like it.
Yeah. Even the polls that you make on this, or the text, these things are very, very visual.
Yes.
An attempt to assess, check knowledge, to check learning. Okay, good. Knowledge estimation, allow reflection. Oh, I like that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
that warms my English teacher heart.
Quantitative evaluation. Okay. Knowledge estimation.
To
To
make
trace.
the admin happy. You know, we're gonna talk just a little bit about that, because it is absolutely the case that a lot of our assessments these days are to satisfy institutional requirements. And even though like making the admin happy sounds like it would be a joke, the fact that we have to do tests in order to satisfy institutional requirements is a real issue.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I think the pandemic has really, really put a spinner on this, because it's really brought up the question, what kind of assessments do we need? Do we need exams at all? And what good is it doing?
Right. Right. Well, are you ready for me to talk to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
sure. So I really love the richness of the responses that you guys have provided, because I think that you have covered a wide range of the things that we can do with grading and assessment, all the way from self-evaluation and checking to see for, for the student to see for his or herself, his or him or herself, how he or she is doing, what else they might need to look at. That's a great use of assessment. All the way to the other end of the assessment, where it really is just a box ticking exercise. And reading that I have found most useful in terms of why we should be grading, like when we have control of the process, is a metaphor that distinguishes between a thermometer and a thermostat. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about like the thing that you use to check your temperature being a thermometer, something you put in your mouth, something that you put into a turkey or whatever, and versus a thermostat, the kind of thing that you would hang on the wall, that makes your heating and your air conditioning click on and off when something is, when the temperature changes. And the distinction, what I think is so important, is that a thermometer is a useful thing, right? Sometimes we just need to check to see how something is doing right now. And most assessments, that's what they're doing. They are capturing at a moment in time how the student understands a particular range of stuff. And the tricky thing that a lot of people forget about assessments is that in their thermometer likeness, they're just checking those particular things. So maybe, and this has happened to me before, it might have happened to you when you were undergrads, maybe you study what you think is going to be on the test. And you're like, oh, I've got it down, I understand all these things. And then what happens is the teacher asks questions that aren't the ones that you studied for. And so it looks like you don't know anything, or I'll make it on me. It looks like I don't know anything, when really I knew a bunch of things. I just didn't know the things that the teacher chose to put on the test, right? And that's one of the shortfalls of a thermometer type system, is you're only checking, like, so if there are 10 questions on the test, you're really only checking if the student knows those 10 things, right? And they may have a wealth of other things that they know, or it also can be the case that the questions are simplified, and it makes, I know I've messed up, I don't know how many multiple choice questions, because I overcomplicate the question. So maybe it says, maybe the question is, how many instances of academic integrity violations occur on college campuses every year? Well, maybe what they're looking for is the number that are recorded. What I'm looking at, the total number that we think happened, right? So I guess wildly wrong. And it doesn't mean that I don't know anything about it. It just means that I'm interpreting the question in a different way that it was asked. So thermometer type questions are, they have usefulness, they have utility, we need them, but they are necessarily limited, because the instruments that we're using and the way that we're employing them only check like one little moment in time, and that's all they can do. So in contrast to that, if the assessments are used like a thermostat, then the whole point of a thermostat is to check the temperature in order to make an adjustment, right? So that thermostat is on the wall so that if the temperature drops below, trying to convert in my head, if the temperature drops below 20, then the furnace is going to kick on. And if the temperature rises above 35, then the air conditioner is going to kick on, right? And the whole point of a thermostat is very different. If a thermostat just checked what was going on, it wouldn't do the thing that we need it to do. It needs that second half, which is a response to the information that you want, right? And those, in my opinion, are what we should be doing more of with assessment. So you know, it metaphorically check the temperature of the room and then make an adjustment. That's the kind of assessment that we want to go toward. And ideally, then the answer to that question is, so both students and teachers can make adjustments and correct deficits, or speed up the pace if everybody's getting everything really quickly. So hopefully the answer to the question is at least in part so that we can adjust the teaching to specifically be more in keeping with what benefit the students the most.
Fantastic metaphor, Teddy, and I think you're so on point with that. And this is where it starts, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
For us, when students are in our class, that's why I was laughing so much when somebody said, because we want to feel like bosses in the class. A lot of the times that is what it is. We feel like, okay, good. And sometimes a lot of teachers will put questions thinking this is what they have taught, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they want to test. But that's not necessarily true, because what they need to be testing is whether the student was able to understand and achieve the learning objectives. So it's also about how the teacher perceives that work that they're expecting from the student. John, do you have something to add here?
Not at the moment, Sina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most welcome. I'm opening the floor for any of the students if they want to add anything to what Teddy has said.
Or questions, or take it further, or whatever seems most relevant. While we're waiting to see if they have it, I got a very stark lesson in this when I'd been teaching for just a couple years at a new institution. Like, I changed institutions, and one of the questions that they asked on our evaluation is if we paid attention to gender disparities. It was for a literature class in the course of the class, and I taught classes that were very heavily influenced by, feminist theory, and like, we were always talking about gender, but I never ever used the word gender disparities. So I would consistently get that question wrong. Like, the students would say, no, we never did that. And I had to learn to say, okay, today we're going to talk about gender disparities. And then I could do the same exact lesson, but it had been identified for the student, right? So I had to, like, in order to find out the information that I really wanted, I had to learn to say it in a language that the students understood. This thing that they're asking about is the same thing that we were doing every single day. And that's there are just all kinds of shortcomings with assessment. They don't always say, they don't always measure what they're designed to measure. And even when they do measure what they're designed to measure, if they are just being used to see what is known now, then that information has limited utility. And it's really important you remember that. Absolutely.
And what's more, this could actually lead to something called the gatekeeping device by academics, where, and this is where, the differentiation and the non-accessibility starts, really, when you think about education. United Nations has been saying for a long time, and in fact, one of their sustainable goals says quality education for all, right? Which means education needs to be accessible and inclusive, right? But the moment you start grading, depends on who's grading, what is the rubric, how are they understanding that rubric, and then how are they ultimately, putting that one mark, is going to make a huge difference between, for instance, who gets through in an Ivy League university and who doesn't, right? And somebody who doesn't necessarily mean they weren't familiar with those concepts, they didn't know those concepts, or they didn't deserve that opportunity. Just that grade wise, that one student seemed to get a higher grade than the other student.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please, Teddy.
I apologize. There's sometimes a little bit of a lag, and I think you're done. I apologize for that. I was just going to say that a lot of times in academic integrity work, we tend to focus heavily on some of the students who are from another country, from another culture, something like that. But even within a country or a culture, it makes, vocabulary makes a difference, and also life experience can make a huge difference. The example that I like to use is for kids in the primary grades and even kindergarten. If they're doing an exercise and the question is, where do you go to get eggs, right? And for some students, the answer to that question is going to be the supermarket. And for other students, it's going to be the bodega, which is like a little corner shop. That's a word that means a little corner shop like in the city. And for other students, it's going to be the backyard. But the assessment is going to have only one of those as being the right answer, right? So, and it doesn't mean that those other students aren't correct. It means that the assessment hasn't been designed inclusively.
Absolutely. And that just reminds me of when I was in grade 1, because my dad is a zoologist and we've always had a house inside a zoo. So we've always grown up inside, literally inside a zoo. So when I was in grade 1 and this was a question, where do you live? I said inside the zoo. And my teacher, you can only imagine a grade 1 teacher reacting to an answer like that on paper, right? And she really got annoyed with me because I kept insisting that I was not lying. This was my answer. So she actually finally called my parents. And then she said, look, we have a problem with your daughter. She's not speaking the truth. She's very imaginative, too imaginative, but there are certain times when we need them to be not so imaginative and so on and so forth. So my dad asked, what's the issue? And she said, she keeps saying she lives in the zoo. Every time we ask, where do you live? This is an exercise we are teaching grade 1 kids to be able to say, I live in, some part of the country, or I live in some building, etc. And then my dad started laughing. And then he said, but she's not lying because we do live in the zoo. So I think it's something like that, where, the expectation, what is the kind of answer I'm expecting? And what is the answer the student's actually going to be given? And it does lead to a whole lot of privilege and sometimes a lot of discrimination towards the student and the student's answer that's being graded. I think John raised his hand. John?
Terry, something happens when you speak kind of I don't know if it's because you speak kind of fast, but we miss a little bit. I don't know if you can speak a bit slower. Maybe
I will try. I will try.
Or maybe moving. Maybe you are moving and using a mic that is not helping us too much. That's what Vivek and I are experiencing. Because is speaking, we hear you clearly. I would like to add. I don't know if I'm getting ahead in the agenda, but we are speaking about grading because, as I have heard about Tracy Bretak, Dr. Tracy Bretak, academic misconduct or academic dishonesty happens mostly in grading. It depends on the concept that we use for academic integrity, but whenever an academic misconduct happens, it happens because of grading, and that's why maybe we are starting with this topic in this.
Yeah,
thanks.
This is usually a good place to start when we are discussing contextual factors that impact academic integrity, because let's face it, grading isn't all bad at the end of the day, right? Like Teddy said at the beginning, you do need that thermostat. Now the thermostat has to show us something, right? So we need to know what's happening in the class. I could just keep walking into class day in, day out and talk and walk back out. But how would I know my students have really learned, right? If I'm not assessing them in some form or the other. So grading isn't all bad. We have seen that, for instance, governments and industries do use grading to communicate about their performance and potential for further successes, to fund programs, student loans, etc. Of course, again, there is always the risk that because it's a grade and a number, as Teddy has said, this can lead to more integrity issues in the future. Teddy?
I would add that grading is necessary, particularly in cases where the students are externally motivated, which is the case for a lot of our courses. The students aren't there because they are intrinsically interested in the subject. They're there because they need the grade to get the degree, and they need the degree to get the job that they want. And so, not only is it external motivation, but it's also 2 steps removed. I mean, so it isn't even the thing that they want. And when students are only motivated by grades, then grades do become a motivator, but they only become a motivator to get good grades. In other words, they're not very focused on learning; they're focused on what they need to do to get the grades. Now, the good news, and Zena just touched on this very lightly, but I'm going to get at it just a little bit more. The good news is that there's a compelling amount of research that says that knowing that you're going to be tested actually increases learning. It helps people apparently focus in a way that just isn't possible when you're casually, taking in information. And students devise ways of remembering things. They think about things a little bit more deeply. So there is a pedagogical reason to grade, as well as motivational reason to grade. It's just that, as Zena said, that's when, if the student is motivated to get the grade and not particularly motivated to get the learning, that's when the risk of an academic integrity violation really starts.
Right. I think just in between somewhere we lost you, and then right at the end we lost you a little bit.
Gosh, okay. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I to sum up, I would say that the grades sometimes fill in a motivational space that isn't present for students who are mainly interested in just getting the degree so that they can get a better job or something like that. But grading also helps motivate students to actually learn. So there are 2 good reasons for employing grades, even though when students are primarily interested in the grades, as Zena said, that is when the risk of an academic integrity violation increases.
Absolutely. So yes, grading can have integrity issues, but there are reasons why we are grading students. We want, it can be a motivator, not the best form of motivator, but it definitely is a motivator, as you have seen in some of the examples we did in session 1. And it does help to, give you, especially to the teachers, it works like a litmus paper to see what's happening in the classroom. I think somebody had raised the hand, Caroline, if I'm not mistaken. Did you have something to add?
I think just
Sorry, it was. Oh,
Caroline.
I had trouble unmuting myself. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if we would be discussing curve bell grading when we're talking about this.
Is that the next thing where we are talking about grade inflation? I think
Okay.
it will come under that.
Then I'll table my question.
Okay. Zakir says it helps teachers to understand their instructional practice too. Yes, absolutely, Zakir. So the next thing that we then want to talk about is, if you've asked why we are grading, we want to look at grade inflation, right? Basically, it's nothing but, as the definition from Foster says, it's when grading standards are declining. Work of a given objective quality standard is awarded a higher grade today than it was awarded in the past. So before we go ahead, maybe I want to ask the students again, because I know a lot of you are already teachers. Have you experienced this in your own classrooms, where you've maybe been teaching a particular topic, maybe a few years back and now, and between the two, you can see that the quality of the work has gone down, but you're still grading them almost the same grade? Anyone?
I may start, Sina.
Yes, John. Yes, John, please.
because of the pandemic, all the classes in my university has gone online, and we have seen a great inflation between the, you know, like the normal face-to-face classes,
Yes.
the online classes, you know. And this is something that we have studied, and this is happening, you know. We are about 4 points over the normal grades, which is something that has claimed our attention.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I think, again, like I mentioned, pandemic has really put up a mirror in all of our faces. Even when we realize it's something we are doing, we end up doing it because of some wonderful points that some students have already put in the word cloud: administrative pressure, requiring us to still grade the students and expecting to still deliver certain level of grades for a particular subject or a right.
And we attribute that not only for, I mean, I think it shouldn't be directly related to academic misconduct, which may be one of the reasons, but also we think that we as faculty are being a bit more, you know, like comprehensive with students, because most of the times they are more, you know, they do know much about technology and we do not. So maybe to compensate that, we to, you know, to do whatever we would like, or whatever we are accustomed to do in a normal face-to-face session, you know.
Yeah, Jean, I think that's a really good point, and I would add that during the pandemic, we had so many unique dynamics happening. One of which being teachers who have never studied online teaching suddenly being thrust into it. Another one being, and I'm actually very much in favor of this, teachers being somewhat more understanding and compassionate during the pandemic because their students were dealing with so many different kinds of stressors, and finding the right balance between sufficient rigor so we actually are testing what we hope to test, and being compassionate with people. You know, it's very hard for students, for instance, who don't have access to good Wi-Fi to keep up in the same way that some of their classmates might, right? And we don't want to penalize people for things that are beyond their control in a global pandemic that we've never had before like this. So what Zena said about it being a mirror, I definitely think it brought to light, so, you know what I mean? Because the differences between the advantages that students have when they have good internet access and you know, when they already know about all the technology, we already had those disparities, but this pandemic made us see in very concrete and alarming terms exactly what a difference that made.
Absolutely. I think Oscar, you'd raise your hand.
Yes, and this great inflation issue sometimes can be an institutional policy too, because, you know, at least this is what I have witnessed several times before. You know, there are some private schools and state schools, and in state schools, teachers are more generous when they are grading students, because in, you know, in private schools, students are more like customers, and you don't want to lose customers by downgrading them. And sometimes the administrators in private schools urge teachers to inflate the grades, to give, to be more generous about grading.
Caroline has also raised the hand. Are you able to unmute, Caroline?
I'm working on it. Okay, I'm unmuted now, right?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Zoom has suddenly changed where the button is for me. I'm getting confused. Anyway, yeah, I agree 100% with what Oscar is saying. I've seen that. I've worked in the private and the state school system in Turkey, and now I'm happily in the state system. And it's I feel much more, actually, I feel like the grading that I'm able to do is much more ethical. Before I came to Turkey, I was working in a university in South Korea, and I can't speak to how it is today, because when I left, the government was actually doing a mass crackdown on corruption in the universities there. So it may be different now, but when I worked there, the end of every term, we as instructors, we were given the ratios for the grades, the bell curve. We were given where on the bell curve our class fell. So we were told your class will have 40% B marks, 30% B plus, 20% A minus, and then such a percentage of C's, and you had to grade on that. And as soon as you veered off, gave one too many B pluses, you got locked out of the system, and we'd have to go downstairs and plead our case to administration, and they would delete our grades and we'd start over again. And
Wow.
yeah, so this was common practice, and this was simply this was the bell curve to put the university on the university bell curve. So yeah, so I've seen extremes of it, and then in Turkey, as Oscar explained it, I don't need to re-explain it, the system that we see here. But I also want to disagree. I don't want to be redundant, but I've found that since we've been teaching online, Turkey's not alone in this, but it is significant here that there are the students who simply don't have reliable access to the internet. And so the classroom conditions are extremely unbalanced, right? And so, I'm not going to go anywhere near politics, but there was a suggestion that students, their actual attendance was voluntary to log on and be present. And so I think I hadn't considered it grade inflation until listening to you guys, and I was like, oh, I think I've been doing that. Because how can I give a student a 0 for participation when they probably never showed up because they didn't have a computer?
Yeah,
right.
And then the student who was there every day had a computer, reliable internet, and a quiet room somewhere in the house, right? So how can I compare these? So I actually had a discussion with one of my colleagues the other day, because she saw the grades, we share a class, and she saw that I hadn't given any of the students a 0 for participation. She's like, but I haven't even seen some of these kids. And I was like, yeah, but how can I give them a 0? So now I don't know. I don't know who's right and wrong on this, but that's my confession.
In fact, we had run some workshops for schools here some years back, many years back. And at that time, I remember these teachers were talking about how they were pressurized to actually inflate grades because they wanted to still have a standing with the board that they registered with, and they had to show certain level of internal grades for students to even be an eligible center for the board to host exams in their schools. And so if they had like too many going below a certain level, they were told to go and change answers and then marks on the answer sheets to bring up those marks for students to keep that level up. So grade inflation is real. It happens. Beatrice has put in that grade deflation in many cases could also happen. Yes, and in fact, I'm not going to stereotype, but what I have seen from my experience in STEM subjects, this is very, very common. If you suddenly have a lot of higher distinctions marks, you will be questioned, and then you will do no, no, no. Usually in this kind of subjects, because it's difficult, you can't have more than these many students getting an HD. HD could be above 85%, for instance, right? So bring the grades down, because that's just not going to fly with whoever the big bosses are. Very common feedback from teachers, lecturers, when I've done workshops with STEM teachers. Anybody has any experience with grade deflation?
I think Beatriz has something to tell us about that. She also wrote, I don't know if it's a book review, Beatriz, but you may also comment on that.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you to Vivek who pointed it out. There's a book which reflects also a movement, and it's called Ungrading. So I wrote this book review about some of the, it's a different perspective on grades. So one of the arguments for considering alternatives to grading is grade inflation and also deflation. So rather than having a particular experience, I just made the point that it's not only about providing a higher grade to lower standards, but it can also happen quite the opposite in many situations in certain disciplines. And for this reason, there are some scholars and faculty in different corners of the world who are trying to provide alternatives to grading, not assessment, but grading, because in many cases may not have an effective or expected effect on learning, which is the ultimate focus of education. But still, it's debatable. There are many points of view, but certainly grade inflation is a very good point and issue to think about when we are analyzing assessment. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's
Very good. It's such.
Yeah,
I was going to say the same. It's such a good point. And I mean, there are a lot of different perspectives on this issue. My particular perspective is that we at least shouldn't give letter grades during the first year of university study, because, and this is a fringe position, but if we made everything pass and fail during the student's first year, then that would give them that amount of time to learn how to study at the college level. And as long as they achieved, a baseline of proficiency, then they wouldn't be disadvantaged against their peers who may have, like, for instance, if you come from a family who's, who have had the last 4 or 5 generations go to college, you're going to know a lot more about college and how to study and how to prepare than if I am from a family where I'm the first person in my family to ever go to college, right? And in the interest in fairness, I would say, like, it's not reasonable that we expect students from the very start of university to know how to do those things. We are penalizing people who don't know how to navigate our assessment system. So if we let students study pass fail for that first year, then that would be a way of leveling the playing field somewhat. And then after that, after we focus intently on teaching them how to study and be assessed at the college level, then we could reasonably expect them to be able to do it in a way that I think is not reasonable, the way we mostly do it right now.
In fact, one of my students had done a study to see admission requirements, how they are kind of standardized to say, you come from X system and Y system and Z system. If you get this in X and this in Y and this in Z, you're accepted to the same level in the subject. But here's the problem. What we have seen, for instance, CBSE system, which is the Indian or Asian curriculum that we have here, a lot of the schools here do not talk about plagiarism, citation, academic integrity, academic writing, all of that. In fact, the system is so rigid, it expects students to memorize their content and then regurgitated it in the exam to the point of the full stop and the comma and the quotation mark. And in fact, the examiner will mark the student down if they've tried to write on their own and not as per the whatever the definition, unified definition, for instance, that was given. So for a student who is comes from a background like that to, let's say, an international university, versus a student who comes from a system where they've been taught to critically think and analyze and write with academic, academic writing styles, and they've got the referencing knowledge and so on and so forth, that they're put in the same subject, even if it's not English or any of those things. Let's say it is social science, one of the social science subjects, any of the subjects, right? So they're in the same subject, but both of the students, the one who's come from a background with knowledge automatically has an advantage, because when that student produces a piece of work, the teacher is going to like that piece of work, because it's going to have a proper introduction, conclusion, body, evidence, referencing, citations, all of those things. Whereas the students who's come from another background, who's not been introduced to these things, will not be able to do that, because they won't know, and no one's really taught them before they produce that first assignment. So when a lecturer then marks the project, it automatically still becomes unfair, because once both the students are taking the same subject, but one student has already come in with a very different set of skills, which has put the student on a whole different level of advantage.
Yes, we got a question in the chat from, this is for pronunciation. I can't even pronounce pronunciation. Alizera asked, that students have had 12 years presumably to learn how to do these things. Why can't we assess them correctly from the start? And that is an excellent question. And the response that I would give you is that primarily students go to their home institution for their K through 12 education, or for their primary and secondary education. And the standards amongst those various places are going to vary widely. It's going to vary by the affluence of the area. It's going to vary by the country or culture or subculture that people are in. It is just absolutely not the case that students generally receive an equal or even a parallel education about academic writing. And much of the assessment in K through 12 schools is often done by multiple choice, short answer, especially in school systems around the world where the teachers have many, many students and they have to simplify their lives a bit in order to manage that many students. It is absolutely the case that there are some great K-12 schools that focus on college preparation, but there are also lots of K-12 school systems where they're just trying to get the students the bare minimum for whatever standards exist in that place to graduate them, and they're not focusing on higher education at all. So if it were the case that everybody received a roughly equal introduction, then that would be one thing, but that is just absolutely not the case. And especially as universities are internationalized further, the disparities grow even more when you add the aspect of different cultures.
Absolutely.
And the language. We haven't even talked about the fact that if you're trying to navigate, that's another argument I think for not giving them letter grades in that first year, is if you're still trying to master academic language, trying to learn all these things at the same time, I mean, it doesn't say anything about your ability to do the work eventually. You just need an acclimation period. Academic speaking, academic writing, academic responses, it's all very hard in the secondary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is something we actually did talk about, touched upon a little bit in the previous semester. Zakir said there's a supply and demand gap between pre and post-secondary institutions in terms of academic integration. Absolutely right. So moving on, this is just a graph that shows you how grade inflations look like. But the question that I want to pose now is there anything to worry about with grade inflation? Because if we're doing it, we're doing it across the board, right? So think social, economic factors, political factors, policies. is there anything to worry about besides the integrity aspect of it, besides the ethical dilemma that somebody mentioned? Is there something to worry about when we discuss grade inflations?
I will start by what Osgur, what the discussion finished in the last session, and what Osgur pointed out is that probably there is something that is a disadvantage for some students, you know, because I have seen that in order for receive a scholarship or a financial aid in undergraduate degrees, you should, well, at least in Mexico, I guess this happens in all over the world. One of the main important factors for predicting good performance in studies is the previous GPA, the previous general average, you know, performance average. And if someone was, if you ask for a financial aid, you will be asked to get a specific grade. So, and as you pointed out, Sinat, in the chat, not every preparatory school or baccalaureate school is the same. They all have different standards. Here in Mexico, as state schools or state system is kind of less strict, you know, less severe with the grades. So it puts students of the same age, at the same level, in different points, in different stances. So I think that's one of the things that may worry about grade inflation, that it puts people into disadvantage or in advantage between peers. I don't know if
absolutely, absolutely right. Yeah, Teddy.
I would.
Ooh, sorry, we lost you there.
I would add that this just ties into all the conversations we were having about relative advantage and disadvantage. Some of the brightest students that I've ever had, some of the most capable students I've ever had, were juggling a job, and maybe they were responsible for supporting part of their household, and they had been throughout their high school career, and so maybe their grades aren't as good as some of their peers who not only didn't have to have a job, but also had money for college preparatory classes or help on the SATs or any of those things. And so one of the things that happens is that these advantages and disadvantages are multiplied. And then when the students get to college, especially those that have had a lot of help and a lot of advantages, sometimes those are the ones, we have different cheating problems at different levels. And sometimes those students who have had lots of advantages turn out to be really challenged when it comes to academic integrity, because for the first time ever, they don't have all those things that the other students didn't have. I mean, they don't have their mom to look over their work for them, or they don't have whatever advantage they had. And so trying to distinguish between students who have overcome a lot of challenges to get to college, those are often the ones who find it easier to do their work once they get there, as opposed to the ones that have had all the advantages. Sometimes for the first time, they're just like, oh gosh, I don't know how to do these things. And all of a sudden I don't have the help that I had before.
Precisely. And I think at that note, Peggy has raised her hand. Peggy?
Yes, I also wanted to share something from my experience as well, what I see, because I also work in quality assurance. And I think there is diploma mills, what we know, and we know that some of the countries actually are, let's say, supporting their academic systems as well by making sure that they attract international students and they come there and I wouldn't say essentially pay for a degree, but they will get better grades there, and they know where to go. And we have this problem because I come from Croatia, and we have this problem because our students, when they cannot finish their university, they just pass and go to the Eastern countries, and basically sometimes they're even upgraded. For example, I know an example where students didn't finish their third year of bachelor studies, but continued regularly on the master degree in the other countries. And I think that's also something that is a little bit problematic. And as well with the situation where I would say there are some countries which are a little more patriotic, I would say, and they really want to showcase that their students are doing the best. We have seen examples last year where the students were giving good grades to the universities because the university also needs very good grades in order to get more funding, to be propelled a little bit. So then the professors were kind of inclined to giving students better grades so that the students would grade them better and that they would get essentially more finances, which I think can also contribute to problems.
So what a perfect link to the next topic, which is now we're looking at commercialization of higher education, right? We've talked about grades, why are we grading, what's the issue with grading inflation, and that kind of takes you to the next topic, which is looking at this whole industry that has become an industry and no more just an education sector, right? Because there is a huge level of commercialization that has happened with higher education. I mean, I'm sitting in the UAE. I am teaching at an Australian university, which is a direct campus. And around me, there are 30 other international branch campuses that the country showcases. And that's how it is positioned, right? So when we think about commercialization, of course, we have to talk about capitalism. I don't think I heard there was anybody from business faculty as a student here. But I'm sure you guys do understand what capitalism is. Basically, it's creating a demand for something so that you can create, make it more, and then you can sell it more, and then you can make a profit out of it. That's capitalism in a nutshell, right? Because it's not a business course, I'm not going to go business ethics course, I'm not going to go into details of it. But the idea is to then look at how higher education became a commodity, right? And the moment you talk about it from this terminology, student becomes a customer. The student is no longer just a student, right? What do you do as a customer? What do you think are your rights on a product or a service for which you have paid money? Anybody? How would you react? Let me give you a scenario. How would you react if you went to a hotel reading that you are going to get a sea view room, but once you're actually in the room, you see it's more like a matrix style impact where you have to see between buildings to ultimately see the sea. You do get to get a view of the sea, but not in the way that was described. How would you react if you were a customer who went into a hotel like this? How would you react upon seeing the room and the sea view from your window?
Gina says that she or he will demand high service with great service. In Mexico, we have like this saying that it says that the customer is always right,
There you go, yes. Petra says, I would ask for a true sea view. Amy says customers complain and demand better service, right? Anybody else? It could be anything. It could be even if you just picked up the phone and, placed an order for pizza, right? We've got a company called Pizza Hut here, and the number of questions they'll ask us. Oh, do you want, what kind of toppings? Do you want olives? Do you want black olives, green olives, or this without seeds, with seeds? And they'll go on and on and on and on and on. You get irritated, but they're doing that because they want to ensure you're getting what you're asking for. Because as Zakir says, customer is king. Now, what is the problem with looking at higher education as a commodity?
Zinat, I think one of the problem is when higher education becomes money oriented, which they focus on how to say collecting monies rather than ensuring the standards. Let's say, for example, international students, when international universities how to say aim to it's a challenge for the university if they want to have as many as students as possible. Meanwhile, we know that some international students cannot achieve the standard and the requirements, and that the integrity will be an issue. Depending on the administrators, for example, focusing on financial targets they want to achieve this year's, or they perhaps looking at research budget or infrastructure, so that kind of things that need budget, and they need to meet with the finance. They need to get as many students as possible from around the globe. As long as the university, I think, can how to say, maintain the standards. I see that some universities will outsource their entry. I think there are language training, there are ELICOs and etc. Ensuring that they are actually academically ready for the standards. That will be great. But we know university now become knowledge industries, and we know that industries are with some of the privatizations that focusing on gaining benefits. That's, for example, in my countries, gasolines are state organized, so it's not given to the private. So they will not become money oriented. So I think that's what I.
Good. That's a good overview you've given. Zakir had raised his hand, and then Beatrice.
I think exactly the same thing, actually. I've been working in international school, and this is my third country, and I've seen actually different places in Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, and now in Switzerland. Everywhere students, like particularly the Ivy schools, come a very rich family, and they value, I should not say value, but value in the questions. The education is something that is their like kind of rights, having it and the way they want it, things like that. It also seems that like the students are basically, they are going to many of the universities in the Western countries, in a good universities. I don't know. It is how it is possible, but the universities are actually coming to the campus, advertising themselves. Even the students not get the required GPA, then they are offering the foundation course or many other alternative ways, including the donations. So
yeah,
it's like that if you have money, you can do many things.
Good point. Beatrice?
I just wanted to point out, well, the country where I live in Chile, and we are currently quite based on a neoliberal model. So what I could say is that when the focus of services or such as education become the profit, then the decisions that are made within the system affect the quality of the education that it's being provided. So two cases here in Chile, for instance, in the K-12 systems, the ones who can afford good education are the ones who can have it, whereas people who are the poorest of the country cannot only access public education, which is not well served and funded. So the differences are huge between the different systems. And even more, in my country, there was opportunity for people to have private universities. There wasn't much control from the government some years ago. And as a result, some universities had to be closed because it is quite embarrassing, the kind of education they provided. Luckily, the government and state realized this situation. They closed those universities. So what comes to mind here is that education should never be only thought of as a way to have profit, because there's an ultimate purpose, which is to create the future, to educate future generations. So of course, we need balance in everything, but coming from a system where the balance was somehow lost for a long time, I could see the dangers and the perils of focusing only on profit. It's not the way it's supposed to be with education.
Absolutely. And that is what is happening. If you really look at the way institutions advertise themselves, the behavior itself is very market oriented, right? It's very commercialized, it's very commodity type. Like, you're buying something. It's not you're investing in your future. You're not coming here to learn. The focus seems to be more, what you're getting in return, as in like a degree, a certificate, or a piece of paper. And that seems to become the focus. Teddy, I want to just jump in quickly and talk to you from the academic side of it. So we're talking about, of course, students here and how the perception of students are changing and the kind of expectations they're having. But from the academic side, what kind of impact do you think commercialization is having on higher education?
That's such a great question. There are so many changes related to efficiency that I think are truly problematic. And the others, and I'll come back to that in just a minute, but the other thing that relates most closely to the discussion that we are transitioning is that we are in our advertising changing from a model where we used to say, come and get the best possible quality education at our university, to now saying, 90% of our graduates are hired within 3 months of graduation. So someone in the chat had asked, do institutions actually promise high grades? No, they do not. They do not literally promise high grades, but what they do in their advertisement is that they say, if you come to our institution, you will get a good job. And that implies, without having ever said it, if you come to our institution, you will graduate and your grades will be sufficient to get you a good job, right? So without ever saying it or addressing it in a straightforward manner at all, we are certainly in higher education giving people the impression that if you come to us, you'll have a good life from then on, right? And that means that we will have given you those high grades and you will have graduated, and that is definitely what students come to us expecting, to be treated like customers. I actually co-wrote an article saying I forgot the name of it now. It's something about the customer isn't always right. Higher education isn't Burger King, right? It has Burger King in the title, and I can't remember if the rest of the words are exactly like that. But the whole thesis of that article was that we are in higher education, professors, instructors, we are a profession, and professions generally have a partnership implied. So for instance, if you go to your attorney and you say, oh, I have this lawsuit, I need you to defend me, you can't just drop a load of papers with the attorney and say, all right, now get me out of this trouble. You have to work with the attorney to come up with the solution, right? And that is how it needs to be in education, that we should be working with students. It should be a collaborative enterprise where, we put in some of the work that we can provide, and then the students put in the part of the work that they can provide. And it's helpful for me to think about the fact that we call this field that we're talking about teaching and learning, and we're only half of that equation, right? And really, if you get right down to it, we're not even half, right? For learning to take place, the only one who can do the learning is the student. And if the student doesn't do that, then we should not be expected to provide that service in the same way that a member of another profession, like attorneys, they wouldn't be expected to get their clients out of a lawsuit. They wouldn't be expected to prevail if the client didn't help. And we should not be expected to provide an education, in my opinion, if the students aren't doing their part. But that's not what our advertising says. And that's why I think those two things are tied together, that we have promised them something, which is that they can be a passive consumer. And so they come to university expecting that education will just be delivered in the same way a pizza might be delivered. And what we actually mean is, we will give you the opportunity to become educated if you work at it. But our advertisements just across the board, they're not. Zenith chose such a great parody slide for the couple of slides back where it says University Incorporated. It's such a good parody, but it isn't that far from what we're actually doing. It's actually quite close to the message of a lot of institutions' commercials.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And it's true. And if you think about it, the more commercialized a university becomes, the more they're going to do what? They're going to try and think about productivity and efficiency, not necessarily effectiveness, right? And it doesn't make sense to hire full-time staff when you can outsource staff, right? Or you can just have adjunct faculty just coming and going, teaching and leaving, right? Because that way you're not paying pensions, you're not paying the extra, living costs and the insurances and all of those things. You're just paying the basic minimum salaries. And that means efficiency and productivity. If we are talking capitalism, remember what the definition of capitalism was. It was about making profits at the end of the day, right? Now, because we're talking academic integrity, what do you think is the issue with academic capitalism like this? Caroline's raised a hand.
I think
Yeah, I think this is going into where you're going, maybe. But I'm thinking about how we're seeing also this idea of just selling a degree. And so over enrolling into departments where, where suddenly we're looking at a world where we don't have, or we're going to have a shortage of certain people in certain fields where, well, we're going to be completely overrun by linguists, or, for an example, right? This is just one that I've seen. There are a lot of programs for linguistic studies. How many jobs are there out there for linguists? So it's just another thing. It's the supply and demand is out of whack because it's following the capitalist model, right? They don't really care what happens to the students when they graduate. So there's a moral obligation there, I think, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Absolutely. I want to bring our attention to something that Alicia Soto-Bono wrote in the chat, which is the question of whether the problem is with the institutions, market-based behavior, or a lack of ethical education in earlier years. And what I would suggest to you is certainly the idea of trying to find the easiest way to get to, the goal that you want. If it's a diploma, trying to find the easiest way. But that is a thing that culturally, especially in the West, we have come to accept as one of the things that quote unquote smart people do, is they find the shortest route to the thing that they want, and then they get it, right? And the problem that I have isn't, that to me is a problem culturally, but also we in higher education, I think, should have resisted it more, right? Rather than saying, and I don't know how the commercials are in every country because I haven't been traveling in a whole year, which makes me super sad. But here, there's an impulse, for instance, towards saying you can get a 4-year degree in 3 years. Well, guess what? Maybe you can take that many classes, but you don't necessarily have time for the intellectual maturation or being able to think deeply about those things or have all the conversations that, ordinarily you'd have. You know what I mean? So in my mind, it is impossible to get a 4-year degree in 3 years. You can get through the classes, but you can't have all the other things that come with it. But that's one of the things that here, at least, higher education is selling and was doing already, before the pandemic. And as long as we are co-creators of that message that says it's good for education to just get it as fast as you can. I'll give you another example, Alicia, that speaks to that. Is I have worked with of advisors around the world in different places and heard from various parts of the globe advisors that say, okay, we're going to get you these basic classes in your first year so you can get them out of the way. And every time they use a phrase, like get it out of the way, whatever language it is, it just makes my heart break. Because what we are telling students is, we're having you take these classes, but they're not really that important. Just dispense with them as quickly as possible. Whereas the message I want to hear from advisors and counselors is, okay, we as a university faculty, we've decided that these basic skills like writing, communication, mathematics, scientific theory, they're so important that every student needs to take them. So pay a lot of attention to that in your first year, so that you have a good foundation to build on. In my 15, 18 years of paying attention to academic integrity stuff, I've never once heard an advisor say that. Never once. It's always, get these things out of the way as fast as you can. And as long as we are giving them that message, then why shouldn't they think that it is an accepted practice to take the shortest route possible, right?
Yes.
So I don't feel like we can blame the students for that. When we are giving them, we are helping give them that message. Now, it doesn't relieve them of all responsibility, but I think we should focus on the things that we can change, and that's one of the things we should be working to change.
Absolutely. And I think, and this is so important because, I see this in students, right? They will want to try and take, let's say you're allowed to take 3 subjects a semester. They'll try to take 4 or 5. And they will argue that, no, but I want to finish the degree faster, right? Because they're looking at it as a service. So, that you can speed up a service, but you can't speed up an experience or a learning process. So, then it becomes very, very difficult to explain to them why, as a university, we are telling them, no, they cannot take more than a certain number of subjects in a particular semester. No, but I'm paying for it. I have the money. I can do it. I can pass. And, you'll see all of those arguments then that come through, right? Of course, there are other issues with commercialization, like, for instance, the research and the intellectual property that comes out that goes for profit rather than for, helping the community in general. The governance over shared governance becomes a huge issue, right? This diagram was a fantastic addition from the Handbook of Academic Integrity. If any of you have got a copy, it's really amazing, which basically talks about macro environmental academic capitalism, institutional culture, the subculture, and ultimately the student. So we focus automatically, instantly on the student itself, but it isn't just about the student. Student is the last cog in that whole system that ultimately accepts that culture, because this is the culture that they're seeing happening all around them, right? So with this, we come to an exercise. This is an individual exercise that we want you to do. Given the information that we have just provided, including the discussion that we've had around this topic, what we would like you to do is use the Padlet pro, con, and caveat to put down your thoughts on what are the pros of commercialization, cons of commercialization, and any areas of concern that you may have. This is individual, so please do write your name when you're writing the answer so we can track what are the pros and cons you're writing. Okay, I'm going to just quickly share this Padlet link on the chat. Find the chat suddenly. I can't find the chat. Right. We'll give you about 5 minutes to do this, and then we will discuss it. So I will go and open up the screen so we can see your answers. So please do remember to write your names. You just have to click on the plus sign, and then it'll pop up and you can put in your details there.
I'm glad you.
Teddy, you cut off? Teddy? Teddy, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, good.
So very good answers are coming through. So for pro, Zakir says open up education in a suitable format, location, time frame. Caroline says better physical infrastructure. Osgio says better infrastructure and equipment. Jamie says recruitment. Angela says increased access to higher education. Irene says possibility of giving the students the best structures. Oh, she's changing that. Okay. Gonzalez said accessible. Nicoletta says because. Okay, so I shall wait for the because to finish. Okay, cons. Amy says devaluation of learning as an experience to grow and develop. Customer is always right approach. Hattis says, so whoever has written this customer is right approach, please write your name. Hattis says lower acceptance standards, which results in lower educational standards. Jamie, focus on the end result, not the journey of learning. Selling titles, not high quality learning. Okay. Petra separates a large quantity of students who may not be able to receive education due to economic reasons. That's very good. Caroline says, oh, so many. Actual education comes last. Honest feedback loops divine. Okay. Beatrice, students seen as clients might have implications in the teaching and learning process. Presence of external services, okay, like contract tutoring companies. Might cave into demands of students. Yes, I have paid, so I deserve some kind of service that I have to be satisfied with. Alicia says lack of knowledge or preparation in the future job. Osgur, monetary outcomes prioritized over academic outcomes. Nalan, better environmental service. Zakir, may decrease education standard, create discrimination maybe. Amy, this potential link to less than acceptable tactics for getting grades. Irene, increase the number of differences among students, different backgrounds. Angela, may lead to less interest in courses that are not directly linked to financial success. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, let's look at some
I want to highlight.
Yes, Teddy, please.
I wanted to highlight, I think it was Angela who mentioned that one of the pros is increased access to higher education. I think this is a really important point to at least note that 150 years ago, the number of people, the percentage of people who had access to higher education was so much smaller, like orders of magnitude smaller. Probably most of us who are in this room right now could not have had access to higher education 150 years ago, right? And so in order to incentivize the expansion of higher education, in order to add more colleges and universities, in order to add more courses at the colleges and universities, there needed to be a financial reward, right? And so that is partially how we got here. And a lot of people think that that is part of the trade-off that we're wrestling with right now, is that, okay, we're able to expand access to higher education, but in order to fund that, in order to incentivize it, in order to get universities and colleges to sign on to opening their doors to more people, they had to find out, you know, basically what's in it for them. And that I think is I tend to agree that that's part of the heart of what we're struggling with now is, okay, now we've opened it to people to the point where the universities and colleges are competing for students. And part of what has messed up our system is that competition. So it's a really good point.
Yeah. It's like my nephew, you know, we taught him to eat lettuce and he loves lettuce, but now all he wants is lettuce. He doesn't want any other vegetable.
Yes.
Go figure. So caveats, fair recruitment and fair assessment can be a concern. Yes. Focus on quality, giving good students confidence. Caroline says create a vicious cycle of trying to be the best. Yes, in a commercial or capitalist sense. Osgur says quality assurance bodies should effectively audit all operations. Yes, of higher education institutions. Low quality of teaching is unfair to students and education itself. Jamie says fast and cheap education. Oh yes, that fast and cheap costs a lot. Costs a lot. Okay. Hattis is setting a set of national and international minimum requirements for a degree. Irina, higher education is a bridge between school and business world, so providing students with a fair judgment creates fair professionals, a fair society. Angela, massification of education is the norm. If you don't participate, you've lost. Zakir, promote the approach. If you have money, you've education. Ah, yeah, sure. All right. Okay. So that, Teddy, is this a good time where we can run the word cloud for you? And then
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be perfect. Yes.
I think we're at like the midpoint now. So
Okay.
I thought this might be a good time. So let me just quickly get the link. So what Teddy wanted to do was ask you at this point, what is academic integrity and why does it matter? Given everything you've already seen or heard, what are your ideas?
The hardest part of this exercise is for me not to talk while you guys are writing it, because I genuinely want to see what your impression is.
Yes, Zakir, right? With this question, we are going to take a short break.
Yes.
Oh my God. Whoa. Academic integrity is.
So I have put the link for the Mentimeter in the chat. What is academic integrity and why does it matter? All right, let's do this. We've put the link in the chat. Let's give you guys a break and stretch your legs. And then if you're still here, just put in your answers or come back and put in your answers. Teddy, does that sound okay?
I think that sounds perfect.
Okay. All right, so we take a short break, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got to stretch your legs a little. John and Teddy, are you back with us?
I'm back. My phone has switched me into safe driving mode, despite the fact that I'm not moving, so I'm trying to work that out.
Oh, okay, okay. All right. So we stopped at, of course, commercialization. So that leads us to the next topic of discussion, another contextual factor that impacts academic integrity, which is globalized context and domains of internationalization, right? So there are some primary domains of tertiary internationalization, such as things like cross-border student mobility, cross-border faculty mobility, university partnerships that we are seeing, expansion of institutional programs and influences with offshore branches and satellite campuses, international training and development programs to build capacity in other countries, engagement with membership in international education organizations, hosting international academic conferences, domestic-based foreign language preparation and training, domestic-based, again, international study programs, domestic-based work with international populations, and supporting international scholarship opportunities. Now, given what we've already discussed in terms of commercialization, right? And we've looked at now, of course, the pros and cons and the caveats surrounding commercialization. When we think internationalization of tertiary education, what are your thoughts? Teddy, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. So way back when I first started thinking about education, I thought that internationalization was one of the best things that could ever have possibly happened to education. Because I believed then, as I believe now, that if more of us meet each other and interact with each other, then eventually it will be more difficult to have wars, kill each other and stuff like that. And I thought that was all great. And then I started seeing some of the ways that it actually plays out. And in many of the bullet points that you just laid out, that there are so many complicating factors. And I think overall, my point is the same as the point about access, right? If you told me, okay, you can either make it so that higher education is only available to maybe 8% of people worldwide, but it'll be a lot easier to enforce academic integrity standards I would say that's a terrible trade. Like, let's open it up. We'll deal with the messy academic integrity stuff. I think the same thing about internationalization, that if the choice is we have a lot of messy stuff to deal with that is difficult, or we all just go to school in our own countries and we don't interact with students and teachers from other cultures, I would say it's still a great, trade. It's a much better trade to go ahead and open it up internationally, but we just have to accept those challenges that come with it. And I think that that is a much better way to think of it than the way I frequently hear it in discussions of academic integrity, which often start with, oh, my worst problems are with the international students.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say too much about this because I don't want to hog up all the time. But I really respond vehemently to people who say that, because it is my firm belief that it isn't so much the international students that are the problem as a mismatch between what international students come to us with and what we expect of them. And even when people say things like, well, I catch more international students plagiarizing, and this is the talk I used to have, somebody had talked about Tracy earlier. Tracy and I used to have talks about this frequently, and she was one of the first ones who brought to my attention that one of the reasons that we think that international students are responsible for more cheating is because it's much easier to see when they cheat, because they're not as familiar with our language. Like, if I were to try to cheat in Spanish, you guys would know immediately. If I were to try to cheat in Czech, you would know immediately. But if I were to try to cheat in English, even when I was when I was still a student, it would have been a lot harder to detect, right? It doesn't mean I was any more honest. It just meant I was better at finessing language. So I guess those are my overwhelming feelings about internationalization. Is that it's a yes, it increases the level of complexity that we have to deal with, but it is that is a trade that is worth it. And B, we really have to stop seeing the international students as the issue and think about our expectations of those students versus what they can reasonably be expected to come to us with. I hope that was enough and not too much. I feel like I talked way too much.
Yeah. John, did you have something to add?
Nothing. I think Teddy has
summed it up really well.
yeah.
So then I'll open the floor to the students for your comments and thoughts on internationalization of education.
Ashrina said that they had poor writing skills, and I think that is a completely fair assessment. And I love the fact that, again, I hope I can say this name at least close to correctly. I love that Ashrina differentiated the writing skills from the content knowledge, because again, just like I was saying with some of the students that face challenges, some of the students that come to us from other places have the richest contributions to make, and also have a lot of great domain knowledge. A part of our task is to ensure that if we let them come to our university, we give them the language support they need to get up to speed with the language.
Yeah, and I remember when I used to teach math, because it was foundation math, and they wanted to cater to both students from IT background who are coming, like people who are going to pursue an IT degree or a business degree. So there were a lot of wordy problems, right? And I used to have this cohort of students for whom English was not their first language. They hadn't even studied in English when they were in their country. They'd come here, they'd done the English language course, and then they joined the degree. And you could see that they could do the sum in their head, which other students were struggling in writing, but they can't explain it. And they don't understand. They can't read that wordy problem and then understand what is it that you're actually asking them to solve, right? What are these kids going to do when they're actually given an assignment, for instance? They don't understand they're expected to do 1 term, 2 terms of English, and that's it.
Yep.
They're supposed to be able to understand content in that language. Right?
Yeah.
Oscar has said internationalization of higher education is an essential step in promoting diverse and inclusive education. Yeah.
Yes. That's why it's worth it to have to do all this messy stuff and address all these difficult problems, because in the end, it's worth it. And I think the more we can remind ourselves that that's what the trade-off is, right? If we have a homogeneous population who all knows the same stuff, yes, our life as teachers is going to be easier, but what are we doing societally when we don't have that cross-pollination, right? And another thing that I would add is that, like, I have this imaginary wish list. If I could wave a magic wand and change things, and one of the things that I would change if I could is that I would have teachers who teach international students have an experience as an international student.
Yeah.
Right? Like, once you have to try to explain yourself. When I was in Germany was one of the first places I ever stayed for any kind of extended amount of time and interacted with other teachers. And when I had a couple years of German in high school, and when I tried to speak German in Germany, they would just shut me down. They would say, "Don't do that. Like, that hurts our ears. Please stop." And so, like, I have that experience of just being like, I had thoughts I wanted to convey, and I did not have the words to do it. And most of the teachers were actually much kinder than what I just said. But it was also true that my German was so bad that it just wasn't up to the standards, right? And if teachers had that experience of being on the other side of it, I think they would have a little more sympathy and a little more empathy and a little more understanding for the students who have a lot of stuff they have in their heads, and it's just really hard to get out in second or third language.
And you know exactly what you said about teachers getting that experience, right? I remember having this argument with my cousin who's a doctor, who was having this huge argument about how medicine was a formal, recognized, mature profession, and teaching, anybody could just get up and teach anywhere. They have to do these government exams, and they get the license to. And it's always advisable for people who want to be doctors and lawyers to study in the country where they want to practice. Right. And I turned and said, but that's exactly the problem that we face with teachers, right? You will recruit teachers from somewhere who might be very good in content and then come and teach at some other place, right? But they have no clue how that country works. They have no clue what kind of students they're getting, what kind of issues students are facing. They might be very good at content, but that doesn't mean they're going to be fantastic teachers in that classroom because they don't know the context.
Yes.
Right.
And it's so true with academic integrity issues. I know maybe 5-6 years ago, I went to South Africa and I was going to do a workshop with teachers, and I had beautiful slides and I had a whole plan worked out. And then on the very first day, like, I started talking about things, and it turned out that, like, their tests weren't made by the instructors. They actually came from a centralized location, and they were kept locked up in a box until it was time to take the test. And it turned out that I had made so many cultural assumptions that were just wrong that I had to go back that first night and redo all of my slides for the rest of the week. Like, everything that I had thought I was going to talk about was wrong. And like, having that experience a couple of times, it wasn't that I didn't prepare. I had read about the South African education system, but I didn't understand what it was like on the ground. And that's what our students are facing all the time until they get, the cultural competency that only comes with being in a place. You just can't get it ahead of time.
Absolutely. So while it is, of course, a pro, and exactly what you said, because of what it is and how it is that we are where we are, we cannot overlook the fact that there is a huge barrier if we don't recognize it as a barrier. That is the context. Right, which needs to be recognized, which needs to be addressed in the kind of teacher training and the pre-service teacher trainings that happen, and when young teachers are being trained to become teachers, international teachers. Zakir said it really nicely. Culturally responsive teaching. I like that.
Yes. And I will call out my country as being one of the worst. Like, we think everybody does it like we do. And we also think that people who come here should know how to do everything like we do it immediately. And that's ridiculous. Like it's a completely unrealistic expectation.
I remember my first year of college, university. Again, I studied in the UAE itself, right? And back then there were a lot more, even the expatriates. We are expatriates. We're not UAE locals, nationals. We grew up here, but we are still expatriates, right? I remember this one professor had walked in with cufflinks. He was fresh off the boat, like he wasn't from UAE. He had come from another country, and and he was wearing cufflinks once, and his cufflinks had naked women on it. Students did not pay attention to class that day because they were all either giggling, or they were getting upset, or they were looking away, or they were busy judging him, or they were doing a whole lot of things in that class other than listen to his lecture. Right? And he couldn't figure out what went wrong that day because the class was very responsive to him throughout the semester, except that one day when he wore those cufflinks. And then nobody, of course, he's a lecturer, so no one's going to go up and tell him, right? But somebody went and put a complaint that, we were offended. He should know better. This is a Muslim country. We've got certain social norms that somebody
He did it in the UAE.
Yeah.
Oh, God. It would be bad enough somewhere else, but there. Oh, my.
But, nobody told him. You see, there was no orientation that happened because you don't expect a teacher to need that kind of orientation when they come in to teach, right? And who would think that a cufflink would make a difference in his skills as a teacher, right? But it has nothing to do with content, but you see, it does have an impact. Right? Faisal is laughing.
Wow.
So with that, we move on to looking at the role of international organizations, right? And they do have a vital role. And I think at one point somebody had said, we need more, centralized kind of monitoring system of higher educations because of commercialization that's happening. Because of this, the geographical border is kind of, we are blurring it, right? So you do need some kind of norm, framework, guideline that needs to come from somewhere, some kind of standards maybe, right? So this is where the international organizations then become very vital and very multidimensional. They are the actors in formulating and disseminating the higher education policies, practices, the programs that we see, the standards, and the evaluations. So here I list, this is again from Dr. Salim, the list of some international organizations that look at integrity, fraud in education, academic integrity, not necessarily academic integrity, but ethics and integrity in education. So of course, we've got ENAI, we've got ICI, which is the International Center for Academic Integrity. We've got ETINAD, then we've got ETICO, which is a part of UNESCO. We have the Asia Pacific Forum, but that's not always very active. It's there in Australia. Then we've got TI, which is the Transparency International, Education Development Center, EDC, and Ethics and Integrity. Before I go ahead, of course, I would like to maybe throw this question at the audience to see how you feel about international organizations and their role in, in standardization of practices. Because I have a feeling Babak might have something to say about this, because I've seen some of his comments in the conference last week as well. So what do you guys think about international organizations and their role in providing this kind of standardizations and guidelines and benchmarks? Okay. Organizations need to be truly, I like that, Petra. Organizations need to be truly global themselves. I think a lot of what we said about teachers kind of also go for the organizations themselves. You're right. Should be truly. Or, Teddy?
I was just going to say, or they shouldn't pretend to be global when they're not. Like that's my big issue, is that like there are some institutions pride themselves on being local and say, you know, if you want an education, you know, from this town in Germany, that's, you know, this is the education that we have. Please come here if that's what you want. But increasingly, because everyone wants international students and the tuition dollars that they bring, they say, oh yes, we have a global community here, but then there aren't the resources that the students need when they come from far off places. I mean, that's the problem is, again, so much of this is a mismatch. Like, it's okay if you, well, I mean, I would prefer global as well, but I think that there's a place for local institutions that specifically gear themselves to local needs, local problems, local students. I think that's okay. But then don't say, yes, we're opening our doors to you, come here, and then not provide them with the support that they need to succeed. And I'm not saying guarantee success. I'm just saying that at least, at a minimum, there needs to be, you know, say, for instance, if you say, I'm going to make a special ad campaign, I'm using something that's actually happened here. I'm going to make a special ad campaign so that we can attract more students from Asia. And then the state that the university is located in specifically has a prohibition against providing supplementary language instruction for higher education students. Like, they can have it, but they have to pay for it themselves. Like, the university can't provide it. Well, that to me is terrible. Like, because you told them, come here, this will be a good place for you to study. And then, but we're not going to give you the tools of language that you need to succeed here.
Yeah. Oh, very good point. Petra raised her hand. Petra?
Yes, so I'd like to continue on what Teddy had just said, that being global means that you do have to make an effort to encompass, you know, all the continents, you know, everywhere. And also probably not just in English. Like, we should be able to do this in many languages, because that reflect, let's say, not necessarily just the majority of students who come, but in a lot of accessible languages, where, because there are students everywhere who would love to see this, like, you know what I mean? So this is part, has to be inclusive.
Absolutely. So nicely put. I love the way you put that. And some very good comments coming through as well. Standardization development of international guidelines should take into account particularities of local realities. Sylvia said that. Reza said, can observe and get report of plagiarism and investigate the issues. Okay. Osgur said, I strongly believe power of unity in diversity, and these organizations offer a great network to achieve this. Yes, you're absolutely right. So moving on, of course, that obviously gives me the great pleasure to introduce ENAI. For those of you who have heard of it, and of course here because of it, we all are, but don't necessarily know a lot about it. So European Network for Academic Integrity is a collaboration of many universities that came together. About 12 partnering institutions from 11 countries signed. They decided they wanted to put in this strategic partnership project. Their goal and purpose is to support higher education institutions and work together in the field of academic integrity. But I can so happily tell you, they don't just look at higher education. We've already got an outreach working group that has gone beyond higher education. We've got a working group on secondary schooling system. Osgur is leading that working group, as a matter of fact. So there's so much that, for instance, ENAI is doing, right? Why? Because they recognize that there is a potential in having this kind of institution, in a global institution, international institution. And you know, this, they say European, but you can see, right? Teddy is from USA, John is from Mexico, I am from UAE, right? And we are representing ENAI. And throughout the 5 days, you will see lecturers from so many different countries. So ENAI could be called European Network for Academic Integrity, but they truly are a global institution that is supporting all of us in the work that we are doing on academic integrity.
Yep.
But now for, of course, the next part, which is the global degree mills. Now, we are going to not touch a lot on this because you will have a whole session on contract cheating and degree mills later on in the school. But just because we are talking about commercialization and internationalization, unfortunately, then we have to kind of visit this phenomenon, which isn't new, by the way. And I wish Teddy had that slide, which she usually starts her presentations with. You know, that quote, Teddy, that you give of how big a problem plagiarism and student cheating is.
Yeah.
You know, and then she asks us usually, like, when do you think this was published? And everybody says maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And then she says, what, 1800 or 1900, Teddy?
Earlier than that.
Earlier than that.
Yeah, it was a ancient Greek or Roman. I can't even remember which slide it is that we're talking about, but both in Greek and Roman times, people were having conversations about, you know, these new students, they just take the work of other scholars and they don't give proper credit. And it is an eye opener, because people really do. Every generation talks about, oh, these kids today do this, and these kids today do this. And the truth is that anytime people are being taught and evaluated, anytime in time or space, there have been people who try to take a shortcut. And it is not a new problem, as Ina said, and it's not even unpredictable, right? It's not like when we tell people we want that. For instance, there have been a lot of studies that have been done on business students in particular. Don McCabe, who's one of the earliest researchers into academic integrity, he did a comparison of the different majors in his university, Rutgers University, and he was very upset and surprised to find that the business students were some of the most egregious cheaters, I guess, in the university. And part of the reason why is because they were used to looking at things in a cost-benefit analysis kind of way, and they would get together when they got the assignment and said, okay, does it make sense for us to do this ourselves, or does it make sense for us to pay somebody else to do it, or does it make sense for one of us to do it and the rest of us to all share it? And, you know, the philosophy of their major just made it seem to make more sense to go ahead and try to the shortcut.
And believe it or not, that was done so long back. And a recent study by a colleague at my university, the focus, although was on Jordan, found very similar results. They compared business students with medical students, and they found business students tend to, you know, contract cheat or cheat more because they're taught all of these concepts of efficiency and outsourcing and, you know, getting the work done, maximizing productivity, minimizing effort, etc., etc. So you see, it's not a new phenomenon by any stretch of imagination, right? Neither is global degree or diploma mills. They've been there since the 20s. They're recorded. There's billions of dollars that go into this industry every year. You know, countries, governments, institutions are just grappling with it. There are, of course, hijacking cases where, you know, there are people who pretend to be one university and then they give out certificates and things like that as well. But then you've also got issues like, for instance, I know in the UAE in 2018, 2019, there were 143 cases of fake degrees that were got. And after that, the ministry went into a full-on drive of equivalency of degrees, particularly that are being done outside of the UAE. And, you know, they will contact the consulates and they will contact the campuses, and you have to show passport stamps that you were actually in that country for the duration of the studies and so on and so forth. So, you know, it's more of a reactive thing that's happening because of, you know, the incidences that are coming through. But more of these incidences are coming through because there is so much internalization and commercialization of education, particularly higher education. Of course, we do, if you have been following any of the stories in this field, there are plenty of things that are happening. The academic world is constantly battling this. We've got, for instance, Ireland that has already banned, you know, mills. Australia has banned, New Zealand has banned, we've got some states in USA that have banned it. And there are many countries that are still trying to figure out how to even approach this problem. ENAI themselves have an international contract cheating project, which we've been running for the last 1.5, 2 years. Anybody's interested, most welcome to go to the website, look at it and run the surveys. Of course, there is no grant for it. The idea is to collect data, share the data with you guys for your countries so that you can do your own study. The survey models are already made. It can be translated if you need it to be, and made available through the website as well, right? Any thoughts, ideas, anything, any opinions from the students on this? Again, we don't want to talk a lot about this because you will have a specific session on this, I think, tomorrow. So where you will see a lot more, we will discuss this a lot more. But in connection with internationalization and commercialization, what are your thoughts on global degrees and diploma mills? Teddy says oldest mention of plagiarism that she's found in comparing various authors with one author. I've discovered that some of the gravest and latest writers have transcribed word for word from former works without making acknowledgement. And this was Lini the Elder, who died August 25th, 79 AD.
So there really is nothing new under the sun. Shakespeare was correct.
Okay. So with that, we move to this question where we will now split you guys into breakout sessions. And we want to talk to you guys about, we want you to think about what it means to be PhD students today in terms of socioeconomic context, explicit versus implicit values, real world implications of everyday classroom behavior, incentivized learning, and competition to attention. So I'm going to stop sharing at this stage. We've already got 3 rooms. So I can randomly assign people to rooms. I think that's better because then it's equal as well. So I'll just make sure Teddy is in one. Good. John.
While Zina's doing this, I just want to acknowledge that she was the one who put together these slides, and she's also doing all of the logistical things. And I really appreciate that. I have been driving back and forth between South Carolina and Virginia, and always been at odds and evens because it's just hard when you're on the phone. So I just want to acknowledge that Zina is doing all of these things for us, and I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. But like I said, we've also got the support from Salim, and the fantastic book, The Handbook of Academic Integrity, edited by Tracy Bragg. Okay.
Thank you, Salim.
So we've got Teddy in room 1 with the first group. We will have John is gone to the 3rd room, and I will join the 2nd room. Okay. So Amy, Ali, Reza, Julia, and Peggy, are you guys able to join? Great. Amy and Ali Reza, are you able to join? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Are we all back?
I think we are.
Yeah, I think we are.
Perfect. Such good timing. So we had very good discussion in our rooms with all the points. We didn't get to finish all the points, of course, because, you know, there is so much to talk about always. But we did manage to get through most of them. So moving on, because we all discussed the same things, so I'm not going to do a summary here. Now, if we have time towards the end, we will. I would like to pass it on to John now to talk to us about why students cheat.
Thanks again, Zina. I think this is one of the topics that has been studied during the academic integrity years, you know. And why do students cheat? And I would like to ask you if you can answer that question in a Menti as well. So I will give you the link on the chat, and please do help me with the question, please. Here it is. So if you help me answering the question, why do students cheat? Why do you think students cheat? Great peer pressure, to look smarter than others, get good grades, they are pressed. That's a response because of the teacher's attitude. They don't have enough confidence. They lack of engagement. They are unaware of it. They do not manage properly their time. They don't have enough self-esteem because they see others cheating. That's an important thing. Because they don't know, they don't have the skills, they lack of skills, or they have language barriers. Because multiple reasons, yeah. Thanks very much. Well, all these questions are answers to this research topic that has been studied a lot. So let's go back to the presentation. Please let me know if you are looking at it right now. So I would like to start with this definition of what is academic integrity. I know that you, in the previous session, you did that. And you know, this is the definition of the International Center for Academic Integrity. Academic integrity is conceptualized as a series of basic principles which are the foundation for success in any aspect of life. Right? Teddy has written this, and it's an essential element that allows the achievement of the necessary learning, which enable the future student to face and overcome any personal or professional challenges. So this is what the International Center for Academic Integrity says. There's also a definition given by Tricia Bertram, and she relates the academic integrity with academic quality, you know, because she says this is essential in any academic endeavor, you know, in any teaching learning process focused on achieving the highest standards of excellence and learning. You know, we can see this common relationship between academic integrity and learning. And any academic institution that wants to be perceived as a high quality academic institution should take care of academic integrity, because it's quite related to academic quality. Once again, the International Center for Academic Integrity moves ahead and says, well, what it means to enact academic integrity, you know, how does it looks like, you know, and here's where they state these 6 values, the pillars of academic integrity, and they say that academic integrity means taking action with responsibility, honesty, respect, trust, fairness, and courage in any activity related to academic work, you know, and as well to avoid any kind of cheating. And you know, taking this into account, and also taking into account one of the definitions of integrity given by Bosch and Cavallari, colleagues and I stated that academic integrity is the habit of studying and carrying out academic work with justice and coherence, and with a motivation to service others by the learning that we achieve during the process. You know, I started to give this kind of wrapping up what is academic integrity, because I would like to highlight that academic integrity is much more than not cheating. You know, academic integrity is about seizing or taking advantage of your learning opportunities that your lecturers or your teachers do offer to us. And this implies engagement with learning, work that is well done, complete, and focused. And you know, this has to be with taking diligently advantage of all learning experiences. Add to them, we try to develop a decalogue of academic integrity, which is, you know, explained in different actions that you can see on screen. You know, this we even invented these characters that try to exemplify what it means to be an academic integrity, a student who lives academic integrity. You know, and this decalogue says that we need to speak with the truth, we need to comply with classes and works, we need to carry out activities with each other's efforts, searching to learn, to answer exams only with the material which is authorized, to recognize original works and quote correctly, to collaborate fairly in teams projects, to respect diversity of opinions, to avoid contributing any kind of cheating, even to report dishonest actions, and also to be responsible for any consequences that you for your actions, you know. So academic integrity, this is the way it looks like, you know. When we look at the other side of the coin, you know, what is academic integrity and what is not, or what is academic dishonesty or cheating, because we are asking this question of why do students cheat, is, well, you know, Jason Stevens says that, you know, even thought that academic dishonesty have ever existed. Teddy just told us right away. There's a nice book from James Lang, which is called Cheating Lessons, that, you know, relates cheating from centuries ago, you know, and then, you know, cheating is endemic. It's in our nature, you know. We all strive to do well. We all want to do well, but sometimes we make cuts. You know, we do cheat because we think there's not enough time. We are not able to do that and stuff. But you know, even thought that people have cheated through history. We cannot adopt a pessimistic or passive attitude about it. You know, we better have to understand why do people cheat, and if we understand well why do people cheat, why do students cheat, we will be able to act accordingly, and we will be able to be more effective in our measures and in our our policies. And that's what Ariely also says, you know, because if we understand what is happening, we will know how to counteract cheating, you know. For instance, Ariely says that cheaters are like distributed in a Gauss valve form, you know, the normal distribution of a population. Well, there is some people at the end of the bell that will behave well, you know, no matter what, no matter the contextual factors that will be around it. around him or around her. And in the other part of the bell, there will be the people who will cheat no matter what. They will always find a way to go around the policies and the way it should be done. But in the middle, we will be the vast majority of the population, where probably the contextual factors will lead us to behave the way it's expected or the other way. So if we understand cheating as a defect of a person, maybe we will be acting different from that if we know that cheating could be something that we may all be involved if we do not take care of the contextual factors. So there's a nice documental of Dan Ariely, which is a Israeli researcher. Well, he describes himself as an experimenter, which is called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, which is very nice to see. He explains a lot of experiments that he has done, and it's very interesting, the findings that he has achieved. And I would like also to explain what is academic dishonesty, and we will say behind Jude Carroll that academic dishonesty is any kind of dishonest act which is contrary to truth, responsibility, or justice, which is carried out by a student for the purpose of obtaining an academic benefit, which breaks with the logical and expected relationship between effort, understanding, and learning. That's something interesting, because we need to understand that this is something that is not, that it's a lie, or it's a break with the relationship between effort and gaining, with the purpose of obtaining an academic benefit. And these are the types and examples of academic dishonesty. The traditional copy during assignments of exams, that you take others' works and you present that as yourself, your own work, or plagiarism, that is using other ideas without the proper reference. And there is a collusion, that I didn't translate this into English, but it's like letting others to copy you, or giving someone else your work in order for him to or her to present that as her or him own work, or even just to keep your mouth shut while you are a witness of a academic breach. And there's all sorts of cheating, such as using cheating notes or non-allowed technology, spyglasses, and any other, smart watches and stuff, including non-consulted references. This has to be taken into account in our PhD pathway. Also invent data. Sometimes you have your hypothesis, and you probably you do not invent data, but you just force the things just to match your hypothesis. There's also contract cheating, that you buy, you contract other enterprises or mills to do your work, or you even falsify documents, like your ID or someone, because he can impersonate you to answer one exam, or alter grades, or even bribe your teachers. Also, Tricia Bertram says that there will always be new ways to threaten academic integrity. The creativity of cheating is such amazing, and during these times, of pandemic and social distance learning, you may have learned new ways of cheating. Well, how much it happens? Well, these are some statistics, but I would like to say, following James Lang, that we cannot say that in Britain there's less cheating than in Mexico, because the research there is no such research that has let us compare between countries. And in any case, as you may see on screen, not even a 10% will be great, you know. So James Lang says that even 1% is not okay, you know. It's like when you are reporting casualties on a war, you don't want anyone to die, you know. You don't want any student to cheat. So we're gonna say, well, in Mexico we are 60% and in China there's 70%. We are both wrong, you know. We need to eradicate cheating. And finally, we need to identify what are why cheating is happening, because if we do that, we will be able to develop a strategy to reduce dishonesty or to induce academic integrity, you know. And we will have the information, the necessary information to alleviate this problem. And finally, I have to arrive to this well, it's kind of the finals. This is a summary of the causes why academic dishonesty happens. And as you pointed out in the initial questions, there's some things related to peer pressure. Well, I will start with the work habits, which is personal factors, you know. That's why it's on black. And you know, we may think, you know, this student is not well prepared for higher education. He hasn't been well prepared. He in his or her K-12 preparation doesn't learn how to write or how to read, or at least how to read or write in English or in the language that he's studying here, his or her undergraduate degree or master degree or whatever he's studying. Also because he doesn't manage well his time, or because he's lazy or she's lazy, but also because he or she has a damaged moral compass. You know, that he has relaxed on the ethical dimension. And you know, if we do think, or if we do understand that cheating is happening because a person is not well suited for a degree, maybe our strategy should be like to identify those people and don't let them go through the system, you know. Or even we'll say, well, we may let them in, but first we will have to prepare them in order for be able to perform as he or she should in their undergraduate degree. And I will continue with this second group, which is opportunity. You know, Dana really separated from personal factors from situational and contextual factors. I will say that these opportunity factors will be more classified as situational factors, which will be kind of the part of the context, but more specifically on the context of the moment where a student is, you know, is dealing with. And one of them is the group size. You know, in some universities, there it may be in a group about 300 or 400 students. You know, it's kind of unrealistic that a student or a lecturer will be able to control what is happening in a 300 student group. Also is the ability to proctor, to monitor, that we have experienced during this pandemic and social distance learning. You know, there are technology that may help us, but you know, we cannot be in every screen of our students, and you know, I think our students our dishonest students have seized that opportunity, and you know, taking advantage that they are not being able to be monitored or proctored in order to use unauthorized help. But one of the things that I will say is that the quality of the assessment instruments, you know, that I bold that that line, because I think this is one of the main things that we may take care of, because you know, for instance, we have here in our university a course that every student has to take. It's like a seal course, you know, that no matter what is your area of expertise, you will have to take it. I'm talking about undergraduate degrees, but that subject, or that yeah, is managed in a same way for every teacher or for every lecturer. So they all give the same assignment, and they have given the same assignment for several years, and that same assignment is you know, like something that you can find in a basic simple Google search. So this and the you know, like the multiple answer or multiple choice type of exams kind of help the students to cheat, you know, or induce students to cheat, because it's very easy to do that. There's also technological tools available, you know. If nowadays you can find several ways to go around, you know. There are technological tools to check if your text, your essay, has similitudes with other text in the web, or you can use technological tools to try to cheat your lecturers, because they start to change words by their synonyms, and then you may like go around the systems, because you know, in Mexico 2019, at the end of that year, we have this program, this TV show, reality TV show, which is called the Shark Tank, where people goes to investors and you know, and present their business case. And there was one kid, or one person that went there to Shark Tank Mexico and present themselves as a essay meal, you know. And she said, you know, this is a very huge business we have started, we have gained this amount of money, and it has a lot of potential, a lot of market, and you know, nowadays you can, I guess this is not something that only happens in Mexico, but you can ask for a quotation for any work, you know, and you can online ask for a quotation, and you will have that quotation for any specific assignment that you need to be done. And it will depend on the difficulty of the assignment, in the amount of time that you are asking to have it done, on the amount of pages that you have done. And you may also ask for a specific grade, you know, because if you are not a great student, and all of a sudden you issue or you submit a good or a great work, your lecturer may raise their flag and say, well, Jean is not as good as a good student. How does he submitted such piece of good work, you know? So you may ask your essay meal to give you a B grade as essay, you know? So this is kind of the opportunity reasons, or the situational factors that were about the why does students cheat. And if we go to the more contextual factors, we will see peer pressure, which is you already mentioned in the question that I raised when I started my addressing. And you know, sometimes in some cultures, helping each other is misunderstood as solidarity. You know, I will not give up my peers when they ask me to give them my essay or to give them my response to that question, or when they ask me what does the exam asks for, and also because we don't have enough education, as Teddy and some of you also pointed out. And the main one is about culture, the culture not only about your country, but also about the higher education institution where you are in, And James Lang has a few chapters in this cheating lessons book that you may see here, which talks about the focus on mastery over performance, and we have discussed this at the beginning of the session, that sometimes this needing of rating, because you need to know how those students perform, if they have learned or not, has taken over the real objective of education, which is to learn, and sometimes we as professors or lecturers, we do not present the content in a way that the students see how does that content is relevant to the topic they are studying, to the subject that they are studying, to the degree that they are studying. There's always pressure, economic pressure, or high family expectations that lead people to, or lead students to cheat, because sometimes their financial aid is on the table, and if they don't perform well at some specific point of time, or at some exam, they may not get the renewal of their financial aid, and sometimes that means that they will have to drop school. One of the things that I think is also important, that's the ones that are involved, which is teaching quality. That's something that I will say, like, that's one of the main points. If we have a good teacher, that's not privative or not exclusive of it, but if we have a good teacher that engage students, that present content that's relevant, that has good pedagogical resources, we will have the students aware. We will have the students interested in learning and not in just getting a grade. Also, there's something that is important, that is to clarify expectations. You also mentioned in the question that I initially asked, that sometimes people just simply do not know that they have to behave, because as you already mentioned, Sina mentioned that as well. In some countries, in some cultures, quoting is not expected. It is not expected. Copying is something that is not only bad seen, but it's also well seen, because you are like using work of others that are more prepared than you. And one of the other things that is also a contextual important factor is the perception of impunity. If students do think that if someone cheats, nothing happens, they will be more tempted to cheat, and on the opposite, if they see that when someone cheats, something happens, that's not allowed, I think that they will be avoiding to cheat, and I will see, and I will see that this is one of the main things that reduces cheating, or one of the main things that may promote cheating, the way that others see cheating. Dan Ariely states that in that documentary, and that, which is also a book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. And this is something that the economical behavior science also tells us. If we think that others, peers, colleagues, think that what we are doing is correct, what we are doing is right, we will be more inclined to do that. But if we consider that others think that this thing or the other is not well seen, is not expected from a good citizen, from a good fellow, we may not be willing to do that. Or if we do that, we will not be willing to to show that to others, you know. So saying that, this is one of the, I mean, why do students cheat is one of the topics that has been more researched. If you look that into your searching machine, you will find a lot of articles about it. And I think that's something that happens all over the world. Well, what should be like the approaches to solution that you already may be inferencing, which is the first one is to focus on learning and excellence, you know, like this James Lang says that also learning and academic integrity is a coin. You know, you don't have only, you cannot have a coin with one side, you know, every coin has two sides. And in one side is academic integrity and in the other one is learning, you know. The student who is looking forward to learn is not the one that is going to find ways to go around, you know, and to get the grade. So if we understand that academic integrity is related to learning, to academic quality, you know, we will be half the way to solve this problem. And also to always do the effort to offer the connection between a specific learning and how is it relevant to your life, you know, to a specific life. And this thing that James Lang explains in one chapter and keeps emphasizing is that we need to focus on mastery over performance, you know, and to master learning over the performance, which is learning over grades. Another thing that I think this approaches to solution is faculty, you know. Whenever you ask faculty why do students cheat, they never, well, in my experience, in my personal experience, they never see themselves as part of the equation, you know. They always tend to point students, but they or we have to acknowledge that we are a very important part of the equation. First, by setting the example, and we have this jewel, this Bill Taylor letter. If you type that into the Google, you will find it quite easily. Well, he says, well, I expect this from you students, but I expect this from you because I will give you this, you know, and I will prepare my classes. I will be on time. I will review my exams. I will give feedback, opportune feedback. You know, he also compromises. He also commits himself to be a good teacher, to be a good faculty teacher. Well, as teachers, we have to improve our pedagogical resources. We need to foster an environment of trust where students came close or came with us to ask us questions, or to even to say, teacher, I do not understand. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Please help me. We also have to think or to rethink our design of assessments and assignments. You know, if we ask a traditional essay, or if we use a multiple choice exam, we will be not helping our students to learn, or we will be tempting them to cheat. We also can use a lot of technological tools, such as text matching software, or readability software, or proctoring software, or also this most of LMS, learning management systems, have these tools to make several versions of the same test, etc.
Jean, I'm so glad that you are hitting on that idea of creating trust between teachers and students. We're so close to being at the end, but that is such a lovely note to end on, because it is something that we haven't gotten to delve into nearly enough in this session. Perhaps we can touch on it later session, but that idea of the fundamental objective being to create trust, not to catch people not to get them in trouble, but to teach them in such a way that you've actually created a community of trust.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John and Teddy. Absolutely, that is where we want to head. We understand that there are a lot of different contextual factors that actually impact academic integrity in higher education. As PhD students, either as future teachers or researchers, these are things that you need to know, need to keep in mind when you are either doing your own research or when you are ultimately teaching in a classroom. So with that, I would like to take the opportunity to once again thank Dr. Teddy and Dr. John for your tremendous amount of effort and time that you are giving to these wonderful PhD students, and to the students, of course, for attending and being so engaging. So with that, we come to the end of day one. I do hope you guys have enjoyed both the sessions. I did share one more link for a Mentimeter from Dr. Teddy. If so, you answered the question, what is academic integrity? Why is it important? After we've done the second segment, so you looked at a lot more concepts, particularly from Dr. John. If you can go back and answer that again as well. It's the same question, but a second time around, just to see if your answer is changing. We'll be comparing them. Not slides, Faisa. I believe the recordings will be made available to the students. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much once again, everyone. With that, we are at the end. Please remember to join sharp at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for the day 2 session. Day 2 will be starting with, of course, we have the ensuring authenticity and originality, preventing contract cheating. You will see me once again, unfortunately, fortunately, but I will be there supporting Dr. Anne Rogerson from University of Wollongong, Australia, and Dr. Thomas Lancaster, who coined the term contract cheating from Imperial College London. So we hope to see you guys bright and early again tomorrow. Hope you guys all do finish that academic integrity self-evaluation tool and finish the pro-cons, the Mentimeter that we just shared with you today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. John. Thank you, Dr. Teddy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.